Number 1. For a bit of context, I grew up in the middle of a farmland in a large 1800s Victorian home. And given its history, there's always been several shacks and barns that once belonged to the builder of this house. And there is a highway that sees maybe 3 cars on it during the night, and directly across from said highway, about 200 feet inward of a cornfield, there's a shack that I have always found creepy. As kids, myself and friends would dare each other to go inside and look, which always ended up with us going as a team. Nothing scary was ever found. Maybe a few broken glasses, metal piles, and miscellaneous items. And there was no electricity or any sort of utility that made it homely. Years go by and the existence of the shack becomes a part of my daily life. However, one particular night, as I was watching TV, I noticed a light going off and on outside of my window. After getting startled, I dismissed it as passing cars, simply more frequent than they typically are. An hour passes, it's nearing midnight, and the light stays on. This time, I know for sure it's coming from outside. My family was asleep, but being my pantsy 16-year-old self, I needed confirmation. Too bad for me, no one wants to go check it out. So, I go alone. I grab my pocket knife and a flashlight, the best I could think of with my shaken thoughts, and take off into the night. As I neared the highway, the light turns off, almost making me choke on air. But I had to figure out what the hell was going on. I make it to the entrance of the shack, which has no door, and slowly begin to enter, my flashlight scanning the room for any sign of life. What happened next, I'll never forget. 5 feet away from me, there is an old tattered recliner facing away that my father had tossed in there for future disposal. I shine my light on it because I knew that I'd seen it rock ever so slightly. As I did that, a man stands up from the recliner saying absolutely nothing. All I could tell was that he was middle-aged and wearing a jacket of sorts. Before I could process what was happening, I was already sprinting across the road and praying that he wasn't behind me. It felt like years before I could make it to my door, but as I'm about to make it into safety, I decide to look back. He was standing in the road, completely still, no words whatsoever. It's been 7 years since then. The shack still stands, the recliner remains in place. My dad never believed me. I wish someone could share the dread that I had when I realized the recliner was facing a window which was directed straight at my house. Number 2. So, I still remember this happening so vividly. It was terrifying to the point that I had to remove my rooms, as I was too scared to sleep in my original one. So here is the story. It's a bit long. The houses in this suburb were back to back. So basically, there was a street, a line of houses, a fence sectioning them off, and another line of houses, and then their street. Their backyards were what touched each other, so you could basically climb your backyard fence and land in your neighbor's backyard. This is important to understand for the layout. In my house, towards the back of the house was the laundry room, and then my room with a large glass door leading outside. It had windows on the inside, which sat on a concreted side passage that connected the front of the house to the backyard. My bed was pushed against the wall, with the window above and next to it. 9-year-old me was a night owl. As a kid, I used to pretend to go to sleep and wait for the all clear, then turn on the lamp and read my books. This particular night, it was windy, so you could hear the dry leaves being blown up and down the side passage. It was around midnight when I heard the leaves shifting and moving around outside a lot quicker than before. Assuming the wind had picked up, I kept reading. The noise was growing louder and louder, and it seemed to stop right by my window. The house is an older house, and it sits on stilts, so my window would have been 2 to 3 feet off the ground. I heard a bang against the wall, and then a scraping noise. I froze, sitting in bed, as that noise came from right behind me. I panicked as the scraping was more and more frequent, and I turned the lamp off and did what every child would do in that situation. I retreated under the covers and hid while listening. My heart was pounding, and I can still feel the fear till this day. The noise stopped and I heard the crunching on the leaves as whatever it was walking away. I was trying to gather the courage to run to my parents' room, which was at the front of the house, but that meant I had to walk past the glass door. Then I heard a thump up the stairs to the back door, then the clamoring of the wind chimes. They were metal and hung low, so whoever it was could not see them in the dark and must have knocked them as they were peering into the door. I heard them grab it and throw them to the ground. This was followed by tapping and scratching, and they even tried the door handle. I screamed to high heaven, hoping that my dad would wake up. I heard the person clamor away, and I got up and ran to my parents' room. I woke up my dad in a panic and declaring that someone is outside. He took off with a baseball bat and no pants, like the knight in shining armor that he was. I didn't know how long it was, but he did come back and told me that he could not find anybody and I should go back to bed. I refused and slept in the lounge room that night. I got to a point where I was so unsettled my parents had to shift all the rooms around to move me from that room. It was only years later, when I was 20, and we were at a family dinner talking about things we did when we were young, and I brought up this particular story. My dad turns to me and says that since we don't live there anymore, and I guess I can tell you what had happened that night, he did find someone. In fact, he found our neighbor, Bill, whom was the father of one of my friends from school. He was trying to climb over the fence when my dad caught him, and the first thing he said was, "Oh, did something make her scream?" My dad refused to tell me what happened after that, but that line chills me to this day. He also found his ladder on its side near my window in the morning, which of course he did not tell me about either, as the creep was trying to climb into my room.
Number 3.
I've recently moved to a new area due to my work, and it's far away from my family and friends. It's a weird cul-de-sac area. I'm currently working on finding friends here, but I work Monday to Friday and go visit my parents on the weekends, so it's very hectic. I start at 7 AM and finish at around 6:30, 7 at night. So you can imagine that when I get home, I just want to eat and go to sleep. One day I came home, and there is an old couple standing outside my door. They introduced themselves as the couple that lives directly opposite my house, and even hand me some home-cooked dinner. I say thank you and mention that I would invite them in, but there's still a lot of boxes everywhere, and I was quite embarrassed. I told them that I've moved to a new city on my own, for work. We small talk for a few seconds and I'm soon inside my house. I honestly put the food that they have given me in the fridge and think I'll head straight to bed. In the morning I see the food that they'd given me half eaten and now in the sink. I must have been way too tired last night to remember eating this. The next night I'm coming from work and see the old lady waving at me from her kitchen window. I vaguely wave back and head inside. Nothing else happens that night. The next night, I've had the shittiest day ever at work. I had to stay behind for work half an hour overdue due to an unhappy customer, and I've been craving my bed all day. I pull up outside my house and see the old couple standing outside their house. Are they keeping a record of what time I come home? I quickly ask myself. I'm honestly not in the mood for creepy ass neighbours and making small talk again. I didn't know these people, and I don't know or understand why they're trying to socialise with me. Plus, the day I've had, I'm not in the best of moods. I brace myself for the lame conversation that I'm about to have. Getting out my car, I just wave generally in their direction and start fumbling in my purse to find the keys to my front door. "Excuse me, miss. Come over for some dinner. You look so tired," the old lady is saying to me. I vaguely say something about being too tired while generally getting annoyed. They wouldn't hold up. I open the door, and just as I was about to step in, the old guy comes across the road and even places his hand on my arm, looks me dead in my eyes and says something cheery about how his wife makes the best pie. Okay, whatever. I thought I'll go over for a cup of tea and some pie and nicely try and explain to them that I've had a shit day and that I should be heading off. Hopefully they will take the hint. After shutting the door and stepping into their house, the old guy slams the door shut and locks it. They both proceeded to tell me that around 7:30, they were looking out of the windows for me to give me some kitchen stir-fry that they had cooked and saved for me that night. They both clearly saw a man standing in my bedroom window walk downstairs and could see him in the living room window walk into the kitchen. They said they saw my car come into the cul-de-sac and then saw him rush back past the living room window and obviously up the stairs. They had called the police and had tried to stop me from entering my house. Whoever it was clearly upstairs, hiding somewhere. My heart fell. I felt dizzy. I glanced through my bedroom window expecting to see someone there, but nothing was there. Just the curtains wide open. The police turned up shortly after, and I had to wait outside while they searched the house. In the crawl space, right outside my bedroom door, they found a homeless man curled up. He'd been living there for the last 2-ish weeks, and according to him, he had snuck in when the moving packers had left the door open while struggling with something. He'd been in the house, watching me while I had been asleep, and would come out while I was at work and away for the weekends.
Number 4.
So, around 10 to 12 years ago, in England, I lived in a little 2-bedroom house on a long road. It's a terraced house on a long strip of other terraced houses. Back in the day, all the attics were joined, and you could literally travel through them. Years later, they realized it was a bad idea. Fires spreading, burglars, etc. And so all the attics were bricked up, so each house was secure. One night, I was soaking in the bath when I heard a noise above me, thinking it may be an animal or something. I just ignored it. This went on for a few weeks, and only it was getting to the point that I could hear the noise when I was in the bath or shower or getting changed. I got a friend to check the attic, and he told me he didn't see anything. He just stuck his head inside, which just confirmed my animal story. Not much happened after that, for about a month or two, when one night I was alone. I was getting ready to take a shower as I was heading out with friends, and I heard the same noise above, when all of a sudden the dog started going crazy, barking and looking directly above me. Clearly, I was freaked out and decided to get ready at a friend's house instead. The next day I was outside my house when the neighbour shouted me. Now, my neighbour is creepy as hell. Small, stinky, strange looking with hint of craze in his eyes. He asked if I was okay. Being polite and trying to show him that he doesn't really bother me, I said yes, and went about my business. Just as I got to my door, he asked if I got to my friend's place okay. At first, without thinking anything, I said yes, thank you, smiled and waved goodbye. When I got inside my house, it was then that I realized that he would not know that I was at a friend's unless he had heard me on the phone. And as I was so creeped out the night previously, I was practically whispering to my friend. Anyway, I rang family members, told my dad, and they all came around. They turned the lights on in the bathroom but kept all the other lights off. I opened the attic door, and you could see 2 lights shining through to the top of the attic, 2 tiny little holes. My bathroom ceiling was quite dark, so I never noticed them. My dad went in. He was gone a while, but when he returned, he was blazing angry. He ignored everyone and walked straight outside to the neighbor's house. We heard him shouting for the neighbor to open the door, but he was not home. I asked my cousin to go back and to check it out. And when he came back down, he told me the walls separating the attics had been knocked through. Most of the brickwork was on my side, so it was knocked through from the other side. We called the police, but they told us that there was no proof that he'd done anything wrong. The neighbor told the police that he never used the attic, and the previous tenants may be to blame. Clearly, in my eyes, he was to blame, the old dirty pervert. I don't think I've ever been so disturbed, knowing that the dirty pervert had been watching me for all that time. I never stayed in that house again.